So, talked about how red blood cells get recycled and what happens to all of the different parts of the red blood cells. But now we're going to actually look at how red blood cells get formed. Right? So we kind of briefly talked about this before, where we talked about you have the pluripotent stem cell, and then it gets some sort of hormone, and it divides into the myeloid and the lymphoid stem cells. Do you remember that? Okay, you've got a picture of it in your notes as well. So you get the pluripotent stem cells. They get a certain hormone, and they divide into the myeloid and the lymphoid stem cells. The myeloid stem cells remain in the red bone marrow, and these are the ones that produce the red blood cells, the platelets, and certain types of white blood cells. The lymphoid stem cell goes to the lymphatic system, into your lymph nodes, and develops into certain kinds of lymphocytes, which are white blood cells. Okay, so myeloid stem cells are what are going to be producing your red blood cells in your body. So basically, myeloid stem cell undergoes a series of changes, okay, until it becomes a precursor to a red blood cell. Right? You do not need to know all of the hormonal and all of the changes that happen in order for it to become that. Okay, just know myeloid stem cell becomes precursor to a red blood cell. Okay, in the red bone marrow. Okay, so all of this is happening right now in the upper parts of your humerus and your pectoral girdle, your pelvic girdle, and the tops of your femurs. Okay, so comes a precursor to a red blood cell, and at that point, that little precursor to a red blood cell kicks out its nucleus. It's like, you're out of here, get out. Okay, and when it kicks out its nucleus, that's what gives it that like biconcave, kind of like donut with the middle still kind of in there shape. Okay, at that point, it's called a reticulocyte. Okay, it's still not a mature red blood cell, but it is looking more and more like a red blood cell. That reticulocyte is entering into your bloodstream. Okay, so your red blood cells actually enter into your bloodstream as immature red blood cells. And those continue to mature for 1 or 2 days in your bloodstream before they become fully mature red blood cells. Okay, they still have hemoglobin, they're still functioning like a red blood cell, but they're just not fully mature yet. Okay, so reticulocytes are found in your bloodstream. And you can actually, like when you do a blood count, so they'll take a smear of your blood and they'll stain it and they'll put it under a microscope and look at it. You can actually do a reticulocyte count and to see how many there are. So if you have a higher number of reticulocytes, that tells you that your body is producing a lot more red blood cells for some reason. Okay, maybe it's because you're anemic, maybe it's because you had an injury and so now your body's trying to replace the blood that you lost. Okay, maybe it's because you have some kind of cancer. Okay, but they'll look at the reticulocyte count to see what's going on. All right. So normally you have 0.5 to 1.5% of your red blood cells are reticulocytes, and again, if they're high, then that could be it for any variety of reasons. Okay. Okay. So you need to produce red blood cells at the same rate as you destroy the old, worn out, and dead red blood cells. And there's a certain process that happens to stimulate your body to make sure that this rate happens at the same rate. Okay? So basically, here's what happens. If you get a bunch of red blood cells that get taken out by your spleen and your liver, okay, what happens is you get a low oxygen level in your blood, okay, lower than normal. It's not really something that you're going to notice by like, oh, I feel faint. It's just lower than normal. Okay, as that blood circulates through your kidneys are what pick up on this lower oxygen level. Okay, they're the ones that detect it. Like, not enough oxygen. This is a problem. Okay, and so when they detect that, they will release this hormone called erythropoietin, okay, into the blood. Blood circulates into your red bone marrow, and the erythropoietin goes into your red bone marrow, stimulates that pluripotent stem cell in order to start creating more red blood cells. Okay, as more red blood cells get produced, oxygen level rises, and the kidneys produce lower levels of the erythropoietin. Does that make sense? So your kidneys are responsible for helping to maintain the level of red blood cells in your blood. Kind of cool. So you have problems with your kidneys, you may have problems with the blood counts and stuff too. So, depending on what's wrong with your kidneys. So it's a negative feedback mechanism, right, that you would have in your body to help to maintain homeostasis by maintaining the proper amount of red blood cells in your blood. Negative feedback system. So here's your pluripotent stem cell becoming the myeloid stem cell. Okay, it can become all of these things, but the one we're interested in is the red blood cell right here on the left. So series of changes, kick off the nucleus, become a reticulocyte, and then circulate in the blood for a day or two and become a mature red blood cell. All right, all stimulated by your kidneys. You can have lower than normal red blood cell counts. You can have slight anemia, okay, or severe anemia. And the way that we determine whether or not you have anemia is by looking at your hematocrit, right, which is the percentage of the red blood cells that make up your centrifuge blood. So what's the normal range? What is the normal range for the hematocrit? No.
45.
It's about 45. It's like 42 to 47, anywhere in between there. Okay. And if it's low, okay, below 42 to 47, okay, you can have mild anemia. And they may, say take iron supplements and you'll bring your red blood cells up. However, severe anemia could be down to like 15%. Okay, that's bad. That's really bad. And at that point, the doctors will probably give you a blood transfusion to try and bring that white or red blood cell count up, because something's clearly wrong. And that's really bad if you have that low of a red blood cell count. And if you do have that low of a red blood cell count, you'll actually be able to see it on the person. Okay, the person will look a lot paler. Okay, and even if you look at like the mucous membranes, like lining the mouth and stuff, those would also be pale. Okay, so like normally they're like pink, right? If you look in your mouth, it's like pink, yeah? If you were to look in the mouth of like a severely anemic person, it would be like this pale, like skin kind of ish color. Okay, so like if you ever bite the inside and it looks kind of white like that, that's more like what it would look like, but just all over. Weird. Okay, because they don't have the blood flow carrying the oxygen to give it that pink color. Okay, you can also have what's called cyanosis, which is you don't have enough oxygen because you may have a low red blood cell count, and you can actually tell this also on a person by looking at their nails. Okay? If you look at their nails will look blue, okay, because they don't have blood flow properly to their nails. Yeah, and even like the mucous membranes may look slightly bluish. Okay, so if you look at their nails, they look blue because they have a low red blood cell count and they're not getting the oxygen that they need. Okay, so that's bad. So anemia is a pale color and cyanosis is the blue color. Cyanosis, so have you ever seen or heard of like babies that are born blue, right? Okay. The reason for that is probably maybe because you had the cord wrapped around your neck, right, and you weren't getting enough oxygen. And so when you don't get enough oxygen, you turn blue, right? And so somebody who's not getting enough oxygen in their body for whatever reason starts to turn blue. So, cyanosis.
The cyanosis is the thing that affects that one secluded family that has blue skin.
I don't know which family you're talking about. So hold that thought and then let's think about it in a little bit. Okay? Okay. So this is your feedback mechanism for erythropoiesis, okay, the forming of your red blood cells. So some stimulus disrupts homeostasis, okay, by decreasing the oxygen delivery to the kidneys. Okay, the kidneys detect that low oxygen level, and they produce the erythropoietin, which goes to the red bone marrow, which causes it to raise the number of red blood cells, which then increases the amount of oxygen to the kidneys, and it's like then decreases the amount of erythropoietin, and you're back to homeostasis, right? Back to the normal level where you want to be, right? Okay. Okay, blood typing. How many of you in here know what your blood type is? Okay, one of you, two of you, kind of. Okay, blood typing, it's kind of cool. So every cell in your body has these things called antigens on the surface. Okay, so all of the cells in your body have certain kinds of proteins and lipids and sugars that stick through the plasma membrane, and basically what they're there for is to identify to white blood cells, hey, I'm part of your body, don't hurt me, okay? And so red blood cells also have these antigens, okay, or proteins, lipids, and sugars and stuff that get stuck into the plasma membrane to identify to your white blood cells, hey, I'm part of your body, don't hurt me, okay? Because your white blood cells are perpetually moving through your body and like checking these, and if they find one that's not like, that they don't recognize, they attack, okay? And so your red blood cells have these as well. So the proteins and stuff that get stuck in the membrane are called antigens, right? There's lots of different types of antigens that get stuck in the surface of your red blood cells. There's about 24 different groups, okay? A little bit more than 24 different groups of antigens. And one of the groups is the AB and OAB group, okay? So that's one group. We also have like the RH group, right? And a bunch of other ones that you probably never heard of. So those are just two of the groups that you would find. We have more than 24. Okay, so when somebody's like trying to take your type of blood and match it with another person's blood to see if you're compatible or whatever, they will check the A and AB and RH groups, but they'll also be checking other groups as well. Okay, just to make sure it's as close as possible. Okay, so more than 24 different types of blood groups. Your blood type is determined by your genetics. You got that from your mom and your dad, and so you have the blood type that you have based on the genetics you got from your parents. Okay, so your blood type. When we look at our the different antigens in this AD and O group, you have really two different types of proteins that can be stuck into the surface of the cell membrane. Okay, you have type A and you have type B. Okay, so if you have type A blood, you have only the type A protein stuck into your cell membrane. If you have type B blood, you have only type B protein stuck into your cell membrane. If you have type AB blood, you have both. Okay, you have both A and B. If you have type O, you have neither. Okay, so you don't have any of these proteins stuck into your cell membrane. So here's what it looks like. Okay, so let's say, so here's type A, right? So type A blood means that you have this, this is your little antigen, so representative of the antigens. So the type A antigen stuck into your cells. Okay, if you have type B, okay, you have this type of antigen stuck into your cell. See that? If you have type AB, you have both. Type O, none. See it? Okay. So, white blood cells constantly moving around, making sure that things are supposed to be there and things that aren't supposed to be there aren't there, and taking care of that problem. You have some things that kind of help white blood cells out. They're called antibodies. Okay? Antibodies are also recognizing things that aren't supposed to be there. Right? So if you have type A blood, okay, your body, your blood has antibodies against type B. Because you have type A, so anything that has type B is not supposed to be there. Right? Does that make sense? So your blood has antibodies to type B. If you have type B, okay, you have antibodies against type A. Because anything that has A isn't supposed to be there. If you have type AB, you have none. Right? Because if you had an A or a B, it would attack your own cells. Right? see that? If you have type O, you have both. Because if anything that had type A or type B is not supposed to be there. So you have both types of antibodies if you have type O.
So it's going to be type A.
What do you mean?
I don't think we get blood, right?
No, actually, type O blood is called the universal donor,
Yeah.
right? Because it doesn't have any antigens on its surface. So when you take that blood and you put it into, let's say, this type A person over here, they have antibodies against B, but this doesn't have B on it. Neither does it have A. So the type O can be a universal donor to any of these. AB, okay, is called the universal recipient because it can get type A and be fine because there's no antibodies to it. It can get type B and be fine because there's no antibodies, or it can get type O and be fine. What do you mean? These? So the type AB has both the type A and the B antigens or proteins stuck into its cell membrane. So it can't have any antibodies against either of those because if it did, it would attack its own blood. Does that make sense? So it doesn't have any antibodies at all. So it's called the universal recipient for that reason. Okay? Whereas so type A can receive blood from a type A person or an O person, but not AB, right? Because it has anti-B bodies and so it would attract the AB. Does that make sense? So that's what it looks like. It's kind of cool, huh?
So AB can't really give
it could no.
yeah.
Because if it gave to the type A, it'd get attacked. If it gave to type B, it'd get attacked. If it gave to O, it would get attacked, right? It can receive from anybody, but it can't give to anybody.
So selfish.
So that's what's going on. When you get blood, or if you get a transfusion nowadays, a lot of times, most of the time, what you're actually getting is pretty much just the red blood cells. Because if you got the whole blood, like if you just took all of the blood directly from the person and you gave it to another person, let's say you took type O, right, the whole blood, you'd be getting both the antibodies and the red blood cells, right? And so you take that and you put it into this type A person, now you've got antibodies circulating against the type A blood, right? And when this happens, the antibodies, what they do is they attach to these things and they basically clump a bunch of cells together. And then the clumping of those cells together is the signal for the white blood cell to come and eat it. Okay? And so if you take and you put the antibodies into this person from the type O person, it's going to start clumping the person's own blood together. Bad, right? Very bad. So that's why nowadays really they only really give the blood cells. Yeah, they could spin the blood. They also take out all of the the white blood cells, because those also have other things that can be bad for the person. So they take out pretty much all of the white blood cells and the plasma.
Red blood cells not carry like the blood for pathogens and other stuff as well that carry it?
They can carry it, yeah, but it could also be in the plasma and stuff like that.
So how do they screen it?
Well, they'll do tests. That's why when you give blood, they give you a series of questions and you answer the questions, and then they actually do screen your blood for like HIV and hepatitis B and hepatitis C. So it's very rare to get a disease like that nowadays. If you get a blood transfusion, it is still possible, but it's very, very, very rare for that to happen. Charlie, what was your question?
What's the rarest blood type?
What?
It's like the rarest blood type.
I think AB is probably the rarest. Type A and type O are the most common in the States. So, yes. Hi.
Which is it the bone marrow transfusion or the blood transfusion where if you tested somebody's blood and want to read as their genetic code?
It would probably be a blood transfusion because it's just got the red blood cells which don't have nuclei, which don't have DNA.
Well, it was like I read something where someone got transfusion like the actual like
Oh.
signature in their blood would be
Yeah,
changed
so
because-
if you get a bone marrow transplant, right? So if you get a bone marrow transplant, you have like the pluripotent stem cells of somebody else that are now in your red bone marrow, right? And so those have the genetics of a different person. So if you took blood from that person, you would get genetics of somebody else.
So I could like develop different.
No, it's just like you have all of your cells, right, that have your genetics, but the blood itself, like it's made from the red bone marrow, is somebody else's, right? It was donated to you, and so your blood has a different genetic type than your body does, which is weird. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, hold on.
So how many PR?